How's everybody? If you don't know me, my name's Elliot. I'm the associate minister here at the Cove. I'm excited to be here with you, whether you are with us live in the room or whether you're joining us live right now on Facebook or YouTube. We're so glad that you've decided to spend a few minutes with us as we continue to unpack our brand new series called In the Meantime, taking a look at the life of Daniel. Now, if you don't know me, I have this really bad habit of talking like the people I'm hanging around. Do you do this as well? And I pick up on their phrases and all this kind of stuff. And a perfect example of this is, you remember when Tim used to use the word percolate all the time? Oh my goodness, it was all the time, at least twice in every staff meeting. And so Brandon and I, being the very good friends that we are, decided to start using that word all the time to make fun of him, because that's what good friends do, right? And so that's the kind of people we are. So we started doing that. The only problem is Tim stopped, and I can't, and I need someone to help me, okay? I can hear it coming, and I can't stop it from coming out of my mouth, and I wish that I could tell you that it stopped there, but I used to work all the way through college. I worked my way through at Vanity Fair Outlets across the street from Disney World on 535. I was the customer service rep, and so I would talk to people from all kinds of walks of life from all over the country and all kinds of different countries, actually. And I loved it. It was a lot of fun for the most part. But we used to have a bunch of British people that would come through because at the time, the British pound was double the value of the American dollar, so they would come in and just load up everything. You understand what I'm saying? And so I would talk to them all the time. And one day I had one of my coworkers say to me, "Elliot, are you doing that on purpose?" And I said, "Am I doing what on purpose?" And they said, "You do know that whenever you talk to someone from England, you use a British accent, right?" I had no idea. And I'm like, but now that you've brought it to my attention, let's see how far we can go. And so one of my favorite days of working at VF was when I had someone from England ask me what part of England I was from, and I looked at them and said, "Ashland, Kentucky." And it was so much fun. But you know, it's interesting how we let our circumstances shape our choices, don't we? And sometimes it's all in good fun and everything's great. Sometimes we don't even realize we're doing it. Other times we lean into it and really go for it. And sometimes it leads us to places that we really wish that we hadn't gone, doesn't it? Did you know that your choices, they shape your future, don't they? And it's estimated that the average adult makes 35,000 choices per day. No wonder we're tired. Next time your kid asks you, "Why you want to go to bed so early?" say, "I made 35,000 choices a day. What did you do?" Okay? I got you. So, the problem is, a lot of times in our lives, we allow our circumstances to dictate the choices that we make. I'm not talking about becoming all things to all people so that you can talk to them about Jesus. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about we allow our situations and the circumstances to change who we are and the way we behave based on the people that we're around. And as adults, we're like, I don't really do that. That peer pressure thing, that's for little kids. I'm a grown man. I make my own choices. I am who I am. Sure you are. Sure. Do you have any idea the number of people when I first meet them and I'm talking with them and they're cussing up a storm left, right, and center. Every other word is a curse word. And then they find out what I do and bam, they're healed. It's magical. It happens all the time. Why does that happen? It happens because we, you and I, myself included, we tailor our behavior to fit what we think the people around us are going to find acceptable, don't we? We do this all the time. And we can justify just about anything. We're really good at it. We'll say things to ourselves like, well, normally I wouldn't make this choice, but given the circumstances, I'm gonna do this. And oftentimes when we do that, it takes us to places that we never intended to go. And we know we don't really want to be. So how do we go from allowing our circumstances to dictate our choices to having our choices shape our circumstances? How do we make this switch from allowing our circumstances to dictate our choices to having our choices shape our circumstances? We're going to unpack this today as we look at the life of Daniel once again, and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And we're going to see they came up against a circumstance where they had to make a choice. Were they going to give in to kind of cave in to fear and change who they were? Or were they going to let their character win the day? We're going to see what happened and how it shaped their lives. But when we last met, we talked about the very beginning of Daniel. Daniel chapter 1, and we found Daniel and his friends, their normal being ripped from their lives, didn't we? They were exiled, deported from Israel in Babylon. They were in a situation that they didn't choose, that they didn't want, and they were helpless to change. They found themselves in a re-education camp that was going to last for 3 years, and they didn't even get to keep their names. And Daniel's name was changed to Belteshazzar, which, in case you're wondering, because I know you were, means Baal worshiper. Very subtle messaging, right? They changed his name to Baal worshiper. You see, Nebuchadnezzar, this wasn't his first go-round. And his not-so-subtle message to these boys was, you belong to me, therefore you will be who I want you to be. You're not going to get a choice. This is why this re-education was going to last for 3 years. He said, I'm going to remake you in my image. You don't get a choice. But as we're going to see today, it's your choices, not your circumstances, that shape your character. And Daniel and his friends, they would have been between 18 and 20 years old when all of this happened to them, when they were deported to Babylon. And so their character had started to be set anyway. It had been shaped along the way. But what they came up against today would test their character in a big way. So we're going to pick up right where we left off last week in Daniel chapter 1, beginning in verse 8. Here's what it says. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way. Now, God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you. Now, for most of us, this is where the conversation ends, isn't it? Like, well, I tried, and he said no. So I guess I'm just going to have to do what he said. And I don't want him to die because I don't want to eat this bacon over here. Like, this is what we're doing now. And so Daniel's choice, he says, am I really going to keep the dietary restrictions of a God who allowed me to be captured, deported? I lost my name. I lost everything. Am I really going to keep the dietary restrictions of this God at the risk of this guy's life over here? You see what I'm saying? We can justify whatever we want, can't we? But watch what Daniel did. Daniel then said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. He said, let's just give it a test run. We'll go for 10 days. I'm betting your head doesn't get chopped off in the next 10 days, okay? And so let's just see what happens. And, you know, if we're not doing well, then we'll do what you say. And if God blesses us and we're doing fine, then we'll just keep going with that. We'll see what happens. So watch this. So he agreed and tested them for 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds at the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, which was 3 years, if you remember. The chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. This was their chance. This was their moment. They could go to the barbecue now. You understand? They could go, and it was going to be fine. And nobody would have been mad at them. Nobody would have blamed them if they had just given in and said, hey, I'm not really getting a choice. It's not like they hand me a menu and I pick what's on it. They're bringing this to me and say, you are going to eat this because I told you to. They could have abandoned their convictions, but their character won the day. They said, no, no, no. I know who I am, and I am going to choose to glorify God no matter what happens as a result, no matter the consequences to myself or anybody else. I'm going to honor God because that's who I am. And what we see here is God blessed them because of it, didn't he? Did you notice that God made them better, 10 times better than everybody else in the kingdom? And what I want you to see here is this. God didn't change their circumstances to make their choices easier. That's what I want him to do. I want him to make it easy for me to follow him. I want him to make the choices so easy that I can't mess it up. But that's so often not what happens in our life, is it? God didn't change their circumstances to make their choices easier. He blessed their obedience in the midst of difficult circumstances. They had to make the choice day after day after day that they were going to honor God no matter what. And you know what? You have this same choice. And the choices that you're making, they matter because your choices are shaping your character. I don't know if you realize this, but your character isn't set. It's not like you get to a certain age and then it locks in and that's what you got. And I'm really glad for that because if I was stuck with the character that I had, we'd all be in trouble because I got some rough edges. Somebody say amen. You know what I'm saying? My goodness. I'm really glad that the choices that I make today can improve my character going forward. And the same is true for you. The problem is the reverse is also true. And the problem is you make bad choices all the time, don't you? And then you have this fight with yourself because you know you made a bad choice and you know that you saw that bad choice coming and you knew that if you made the wrong one, you'd end up where you are, but here you are anyway because it came and you made the wrong choice. And then you start arguing with yourself and you say things like, I can't believe you did this again. You knew you were going to end up here, and you made the wrong choice anyway. I don't even know why anybody likes you, much less ever trusted you with anything important, because you can't even do this right. How do I know you have this argument with yourself? Because I have it with myself all the time. See, the question isn't, are my choices shaping my character? Are my choices changing who I'm becoming? The question is, who do you want to become? Who do you want to become? When's the last time you gave that some thought? Are you intentionally becoming someone, or you're just kind of floating through life hoping for the best? You see, when you decide, I'm going to become this, whatever this is, it gives some intentionality and some purpose, some meaning and direction to your life, doesn't it? And that's a really good thing. The bad part is, whenever you decide I'm going to become this, you immediately hit resistance, don't you? And sometimes that resistance comes from the outside. Sometimes the people in your life or somebody in your life will say, I don't think that's a good idea. And so they want to push back. Sometimes there's somebody in your life, I'm just going to say it. There's somebody in your life who didn't realize their potential, so they don't want you to realize yours because it'll expose them. And so they push back against you, don't they? Maybe you find yourself there. But a lot of times, that pressure isn't even external. A lot of times that resistance that we face comes from right here, doesn't it? It comes from the person in the mirror. Because like we said a minute ago, we keep making bad decisions and it sets us back. I wish that I could tell you that once you decide to become something, everything's up and to the right. Everything's smooth sailing, but that's just not the reality of life, is it? And so sometimes what we do instead of aiming for something is we just decide, I'm just going to float through and we'll see what happens. And at first glance, that might seem a little bit easier because I don't have to make any decisions. I just kind of float along. But what you find out pretty soon is that when you allow your circumstances to dictate all of your choices, you float through and you float in and out, and pretty soon you find yourself in a place where you don't know who you are or what you believe or what you stand for or any of that stuff. And you keep asking yourself this question, who am I and why am I even here? And I don't want that for you. I don't want that for me. So I came here today to say this to you, and I hope this is freeing for you. you are not a product of your circumstances. You're a product of your choices. You're not a product of your circumstances. You're a product of your choices. And I hope that's freeing for you, because some of us come from some dark places, don't we? Some of us have been through some really awful circumstances. And if we had allowed them to, they would have defined our lives. And they keep reaching back out to grab us. And sometimes the choices that we make, they don't necessarily change our circumstance that we're in right now. Because you don't always get to choose your circumstance. Daniel didn't, did he? He wouldn't have chosen that for anything. You don't always get to choose your circumstance, but you do get to choose who you're going to be in the middle of it. You don't get to choose how long the circumstance that you find yourself in right now is going to last. You don't get to choose when everything gets better, but you do get to choose who you're going to be in the meantime. And a lot of times in our lives, we want to say that we're a product of our circumstances because, at least when I do it, it's because I want an excuse for the choices that I'm making. I want to be able to say, well, it's not my fault. I was raised that way. That's the model of parenting that I saw. Or this is just how my family is with money, with whatever. This is what we've always done. I can't help it. And the truth of the matter is, I might not get to choose my circumstances, but I get to choose who I'm going to be in the middle of them. Can you imagine what would have happened to Daniel and his friends if they had said, hey, we don't really have any choice here. We just got to eat this food because they told us we have to. New king, new land, new job, new rules. So, okay, fine. What would have happened? Well, I can tell you this. They would have missed out on the blessing, don't you think? They'd have missed out on the blessing. So how do we do what they did? Because the choice that they made impacted their lives and the lives of everyone around them. Their choices began to shape their circumstances. So how do we begin to do this in our lives? To flip the script from allowing our circumstances to dictate our choices to allowing our choices to start shaping our circumstances. Well, a few weeks ago, we finished up the series called The Kingdom when we were looking at the Sermon on the Mount. And if you remember, we ended that talking about the parable of the wise and foolish builders. If you weren't here, I'll give you a brief recap of that parable. There's two builders. One is a wise builder, one's a foolish. They both build a house. The wise builder has a foundation of rock. The foolish builder just builds the house right there on the sand. Big storm comes, hits both houses. Obviously, the one built on the rock stands, and the one built on sand, what happens? It collapses in on itself. That's right. What's the difference between the two? Well, Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, he said the difference between the wise builder and the foolish one is this. The foolish builder hears what I'm saying. Here's the words of Jesus, and doesn't do anything with it. And we said that week that the scary part of that is that means that this could be a person who never missed a Sunday in their life, comes to church every week, does their devotion reading every day, is in 17 life groups because they're available and I got the time. But they don't do anything with what they've heard, with what they've read, with what they've seen. They hear the words of Jesus, but they don't do anything with them. And according to Jesus, that makes you a fool. Because when the storm comes, and it is coming, maybe you're in the middle of it right now, what you'll find is you don't have any foundation, and it will collapse, your life will collapse in on itself, won't it? Contrast that with the wise builder. What made him wise? Well, he took the words of Christ that he had heard, and he actually did something with them. He applied them to his life. So he had a firm foundation. So when the storm came, applying Jesus' word to your life doesn't exempt you from storms, by the way. When the storm came, it didn't fall apart because he had built on a firm foundation. He had chosen to follow Jesus no matter what, no matter the circumstances that arose. You see, your choices shape your character shapes your life. Your choices shape your character, and your character shapes your life. Maybe my favorite part of this whole discussion about Daniel and the dietary dilemma, if you will, is this. We see that when we glorify God with our choices, he blesses us even in the midst of difficult circumstances. Because he doesn't always take those difficult circumstances away, does he? But he blessed them right in the middle of it. And he'll bless you right in the middle of whatever you're going through as well. He says, will you make the choice to follow me? Day after day. If you will, I want to bless your life, even in the middle of a pandemic, even in the middle of a job layoff, even in the middle of a divorce, a death in the family, diagnosis, sentence, whatever it is. I want to bless you right in the middle of it, but you've got to make the choice. Are you going to follow Jesus or are you not? Because your choices, not your circumstances, will shape your character, and your character will shape your life. My prayer for you, and my prayer for me, is that we would take our cue once again from Daniel, who found himself in horrific circumstances. And in spite of everything, he was able to trust God in the middle of the trial, and he was able to make the choice to follow God, come what may. That's my prayer for you. That's my prayer for me. And this isn't going to be easy. I wish I could tell you it would be easy, but it's not. It's going to be a daily decision that we have to make. The good news is our God has not abandoned us. And as we say around here, we're in this together. Let's pray.